And today I get an opportunity to talk to somebody who's a coworker with me at Cycling 74, but he's also got an incredibly rich artistic and professional artistic life. His name's Christopher Reid Martin, and I don't even want to try and define what he does. I'm going to let him define it. So with that, let's say hello to Christopher. Hey, Christopher, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Hey, thanks a lot for joining me for this chat.
Likewise, thank you for allowing me to talk about all of the different things that I do.
Yeah, so I know them, but let's introduce all these different things to the listeners. What represents your current life?
Where I am currently is that I was just hired recently with Cycling 74 back in December. I currently live in downtown Los Angeles. I have way too many music projects to kind of like maybe count on one hand, but the current ones that I do have, I think I could probably characterize those in terms of maybe shows that I have coming up, as well as recordings that I'm currently working on, as some of them may be defunct or on some kind of back burner. So my longest standing project that I've had for about 15 years is my solo project called Shelter Death, and that was a recording project for about 10 years until I decided it was a worthy enough thing to actually do in a live setting. That was my very first solo project, and that came from kind of DIY home recording back when I was living in Orange County. So that started with like a Yamaha AW16 mixer, some like broken amplifiers and tape machines, and just anything that could be mic'd and put through an effects chain. A lot of borrowed equipment from friends that maybe they weren't using certain things or whatnot, but with that I was able to kind of make these CDRs and hand them out to people who I felt would actually give it a listen, given what kind of music it was. And that was a very difficult thing, I think, at the time, because in Orange County, I think a lot of people appreciate your personality, but when you're making more abstract kinds of music and sound, it may be a little difficult for people to kind of latch on to. So that's been the longest standing one. I have a project with my friend Gabby Strong called CGRSM. And that is both of us on electric guitars doing a lot of feedback and tonality and timbre exploration. And I would say compositionally and temporally, that comes, secondhand, as it's kind of loosely improvised for the most part, much in the spirit of bands like Flying Saucer Attack or Dead Sea. Occasionally, I play with Michael Morley, who's actually in the Dead Sea, and we did a tour a couple of years ago as Gate, so sometimes I play in his musical project depending on what weird ideas he has, and we're going to be playing a show up in the Bay Area. He's going to be doing 12-string acoustic stuff, which will be really interesting. Yeah. My most ambitious music project I have right now is called Rotary ECT. ECT is short for electroconvulsive therapy. The next shows that I have coming up are at Coaxial, which I'll talk about in a second here, and Desert Days in October. And that one is integrated visuals and electronics using Max. So it's a very ambitious project with a lot of equipment and visuals to support it. So it's probably the one that I've been investing most of my time with. So, and then I play under my given name, and that's from more of an artistic performative aspect, with sound almost acting as a repercussion of the performance rather than it being like a primary repercussion. So it's like doing different actions with contact mics and performing different actions as opposed to playing an instrument. The goal of that is to kind of bring out a lot of feelings that I've witnessed with more contemporary music forms. So one thing was like crawling up a ladder that was contact mic and trying to hang something from a ceiling, like a 14-foot ladder. with the intention of it being just in the just out of reach for me to struggle with it a little, with the sole intention of making the person viewing it or seeing that very nervous.
Right.
So these are things that with a lot of punk bands, if you're in like a pit or something like that, there may be kind of a vocalist, may have a kind of assertive attitude that can make people nervous. So sure. A lot of it is trying to explore how I can bring out these unexplored feelings with the viewer without necessarily actively playing an instrument that's going to do that. So that's where I currently am. And then I have a project called Id Meridian, which is just songwriting. There's talks with my partner, Susie Poling, to make it a reality. However, I'll have a lot of inhibitions about it. And then I have one more project I'll talk about really quickly, which is La Línea de la Concepción, which is named after a town in Spain, translates to the line of conception. And that's an acoustic double accordion project. My grandfather played double accordion, and my other grandfather played harmonica and mandolin. So I still have the harmonica, actually, and we'll sometimes play with it, but it makes sense to make this project a reality and name it The Line of Conception, because I feel like it is somewhat of an homage, like family history.
Right. Where you came from, sure.
Exactly, or where my ancestors came from. Mm-hmm. So, and it's also a challenge for me to play acoustically. It's one of the most difficult things for me. I'm very prone to drown things out and reverb and process everything. I need to just actually tell myself that hey, this instrument actually just sounds good in an acoustic atmosphere, and be a little more confrontational, I guess, in that manner.
Sure.
I guess with music out of the way, I currently am a board member and curator at a space here in Los Angeles called Coaxial. The space is run by two individuals, Brock Fansler and Eva Aguila, and they started this space. The original intention was to actually start as a studio for them to explore their video art project, which is called Experimental Half Hour.
Yeah, right, okay.
And Experimental Half Hour started in Portland by Brock and Ava, and what they would do is they would set up these big green screens and would do all sorts of analog, I imagine there's some digital processing that happens, and have performers play in front of a green screen. And I think they might have done some open access stuff up in Portland.
Okay.
I think it was very hard for them to really gain any traction being in Portland, and they were the only people really doing what they were doing. Mm-hmm. In Los Angeles and also New York, there were people doing similar things. They had made the move down here, and I think they had some difficulty really just kind of getting through to the art community. And a big reason for that is because this is a very strange medium of art, so to have video synthesis with performers in front of it and then have it broadcast on a certain medium. So I think a lot of the feedback that they got was it was too weird, but at the same token, there were all of these great video artists in Los Angeles doing really interesting things. And there wasn't really, I want to say, kind of a central hub at that time that was dedicated towards doing these things. There were events that would happen, but they were happening at different spaces.
Right.
I remember there used to be a curational experimental video crew called Ghosting, and I remember in the beginning, it was this was in 2013. It was you're showing up at someone's house, who happens to have a projector outside, and you're setting up some blankets, and
right.
And you're watching videos by, Sabrina Rate and JJ Stratford, and really great video art. But now that there's a central hub like Coaxial that Brock and Ava started back in, might have been 2015, early 2015. Now that that's been started, it's been kind of a host area for not only video artists per se, but people who like to explore integrated multimedia formats. The most recent exhibition that we had There's a gentleman named Byron Westbrook who did this kind of quadraphonic video piece, which was video of him recording different objects, like one of those ocean / like rain modules that you turn on to go to sleep, little ambient.
Little noise machines, right?
Yeah, little noise machines, and like guitars with EBOs set on them. And it was video of him with a microphone kind of recording the environment and, panning back with the microphone to these objects. And all of these images were separately had their own sound source.
Oh, okay.
So it allowed, even, at some points it's like the video of him miking the guitar was actually in harmony with the digital Shruti box that you'd be listening to on the TV in the corner.
Right.
And it was constantly changing. So Coaxial looks to kind of like have artists who have these ideas explore that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not all we're limited to. We do a lot of workshops. One of the individuals on the board, Autumn, does a lot of workshops with Arduino. Where I'm at currently with Coaxial, since it started, is I live very close to the space.
Okay.
So I like to kind of refer to myself as like the groundskeeper a lot of the times.
Okay.
But, with that said, my interest right now is monthly exhibitions for people that are able to explore these integrated multimedia formats and use our TVs and equipment to really make an exhibition that is not only sound-based, not only video-based, maybe not even necessarily geared towards physical pieces per se. Where I started with Coaxial was I had known Brock and Ava through my partner Susie, and we had known that they were looking for a space, and we saw the space very close to where we live kind of open up, and we kind of gave them the heads up about it. When we had gone in there, I had some inhibitions. I was already curating shows and whatnot, and in Los Angeles, and they were very, very welcome to me hosting anything here at this space. I had been doing some video art and whatnot, and had been like kind of dabbling in it, but it was nothing that I was really showcasing on a regular basis or anything like that. So it's strange when you have this space that is really celebrating this video art and performance and all these different things, that you don't realize like the degree to me exploring video art in a more serious manner has been a direct repercussion of my involvement there. And I think most of the curation that I'm kind of getting into now, or more geared toward, is screenings. And I think that there's so much amazing video art now in the world, and to be a part of it with Coaxial in one way or another is a great privilege. At the same time, I think, it's like you kind of learn about the kind of struggles of this art, which is, I'm not going to say non-tangible, but almost barely tangible.
I hear where you're coming from. I mean, because if nothing else, unlike, say, a gallery, if you get something that people really enjoy, it's not like they can buy it and help fund the thing. It's the experience of seeing it happen that is the thing. And it makes for a very different prospect than like a gallery that has exhibits but also sells the paintings on the wall.
Exactly. And a lot of the tools that go into making these things are not necessarily part of the artwork. So you think of an oil painting or a sculptural piece. The tools are right there. It's how, right. How it's been arranged. What are the tools that are tangible with video art? It's that you have projector, and I think right. sound might suffer. I mean, sound suffers from the same thing to a certain degree. It's this idea that we're not showcasing instruments, we're showcasing, human interaction with instruments. So, right. Having physical things that you can't really sell or whatnot, I guess kind of differentiates us from other galleries in that regard. Mm-hmm. We have to really figure out other ways. I mean, we're a nonprofit. We have to figure out other ways to generate this money. And with the board members that we currently have all being very much volunteer based, and also it being very us all having access to the calendar to book things that we see fit has been the one thing I think that's like kind of kept it going. And also the variability that we have in, our events, whether it be workshops, whether it be an exhibition, whether it be like a video art or showcasing some modular synths. We did a thing a couple of years ago with LZX machines that was really great. Mm-hmm. So it really welcomes itself so much to so many different things. And I think the tangibility is definitely a thing, but there's also a demand for more integrated mediums of art and galleries. And I think that's something that Coaxial has a big heads up on.
Sure. Now, one of the things I noticed from looking at the Coaxial site is you guys burn through a lot of performers and workshops and exhibitions and stuff like that, kind of on the order of like one every 3 or 4 days. Am I catching that right?
Yeah, there's a big board of us. It started off with 8 of us. Mm-hmm. Even with every added member that we've had, I don't know, I think it might be around 15 now. With every person that we've had, that decision to have people curate and be part of Coaxial has really come from people coming to the space, seeing the space, being inspired by the space, and kind of sharing their ideas with us firsthand. Sure. That they have. We don't have necessarily a process that we pick things from. I mean, we have an inbox and we take open submissions and whatnot. But the things that are really attractive to Coaxial are people that are looking to teach and be more community based and teach people, things like building a old phone to be a microphone or something mm-hmm. like that. For someone that wants to screen some experimental video with like poetry reading or something like that, people that have those ideas that come and they share their ideas with us, and if it generates with one of us here, then usually we kind of give them some leeway to go ahead and pursue that. At some point, based off of where we are and what we see happening, they may see a desire to become more involved, and that's been kind of the beautiful growth of the space.
So I have a lot more questions, but before I get there, one of the things is you've kind of given us a huge buffet of work that you do, and it's amazing. I mean, from solo recording work, duets as a guitarist, playing an accordion scenario, doing video art and curating, working as the quote groundskeeper at Coaxial, as well as being putting on shows and exhibitions. I am curious where you come from. I mean, you dropped the nugget that you grew up in Orange County. I'm telling you, I don't think Orange County develops a lot of people that come out of it with the ideas and the skill set that you have.
What's interesting is that being in Orange County, you quickly find your people. There's like kind of 2 takeaways. You quickly find your people who are doing interesting things.
Okay.
And I think with that, I kind of had a little bit of a punk attitude towards things that were happening around me in Orange County. And having like a tight-knit group of people that were doing interesting creative things was enough. Right. However, moving out to Los Angeles, I learned that there's other people within like the larger realm of Orange County that maybe made the move out here, made multiple moves and ended up in Los Angeles. And sometimes I'll be like, where did you grow up? And they'll be like, Orange County. And I'll be like, all right. So there were interesting people in Orange County, but like I think the biggest takeaway is that they left.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, there's people back home that are really doing interesting creative things that I remember doing interesting creative things with musically. They've kind of shifted gears in their creativity. So I have a lot of friends that kind of ended up working in like video games and things like that. Sure, so it's like, and right now that's an art form that definitely doesn't necessitate a move to Los Angeles.
Right.
However, I was coming to a lot of, I mean, when I was out of high school, I was really late with maybe in high schools, I was very late with my access to the internet. So by the time I had free access to the internet, which was like in high school for the most part, this was, around the time when, LimeWire and Napster were a big deal. And before that, I was, making regular trips to like in Orange County, there's a Tower Records, which was hosted a lot of like rare memorabilia and music and stuff. And I think when there's something that you realize is not overtly accessible, but it's attractive, you realize that there's this thing that exists and it's huge and you have no understanding of it, such as electronic music, like avant-garde. I think it's like you want to know more, even if it is kind of off-putting, it makes you more curious. So it's like music exploration started earlier for me, and it started from just like going to like listening stations at like Tower Records and Virgin Megastore and realizing that there were other things in the world that didn't fall under this category of mainstream music, but given even more exposure and thirst to understand more about experimental music and all of these different like forms of music, the internet was like the one thing that I was like really thirsting for. I think that when that started happening, that kind of shifted my interest. There's something that happens when you're like deprived of this thing that you want, that you end up wanting it more. So having a slow connection to the internet, even when when we first got the internet, which was like 2002 or something like that, even this like that thirst was already established. Like I think that since then it hadn't really stopped. Wanting to know more and experience more, like listen to different types of music and experience different types of music. And in Orange County in like 2004, when I'd graduated high school, most of my friends were I think were also thirsting for more, but there was also the accessibility to like independent music shows, which was a lot of garage rock. And I'm not saying that garage rock is a conventional form of music by any means, but I think by the time that I had discovered that and known about it, it wasn't very inviting to me. Okay. And I was looking for something else. And so by this point, I was going out to Los Angeles pretty regularly and kind of had my ear tuned to a lot of experimental music in Los Angeles at the time. And this was also around when I was first starting to record music and make CDRs. I remember going to a space called Echo Curio. This was at a time when people within the experimental music community in Los Angeles were making CDRs also and kind of trading them. And it hadn't even occurred to me that other people were really doing that when I was like kind of making releases myself. So it kind of, even if I wasn't making quote unquote noise or a certain type of experimental music, just that DIY culture in itself was like very enlightening to me and refreshing. Those were like the years when I was still in school. I was actually still in school for music and art and kind of made some connections there. But it was such a sterile environment that it was a little off-putting for me. And I was even taking electronic music classes, and that was, even though I had access to a Dopefer A100 in the music lab and Juno, and I had met some people that were into experimental music, I think that there was still something missing. And I think the thing that was missing was not saying that I'm a big fan of cultural movements per se, but there was something happening, and that I felt that whatever I was doing could probably generate a little more feedback. And so my focus on moving to Los Angeles took a very long time, but it was definitely, I think I've always known that it was in the cards. And coming out here, you realize kind of the the benefits of being out here. Like, I feel very privileged to be here and be so involved and integrated with interesting artists who are really doing amazing things, and to be able to do stuff and get feedback from peers. At the same time, I remember getting off of work at my terrible grocery store job that I had, and really anticipating the drive to Los Angeles to see some live music that wouldn't occur in Orange County. That was totally, even if I didn't like it per se, it was foreign to me. And that part of me, the comfort that I have here, is something that I am almost sort of longing not to have, if that makes sense. I want more maybe discomfort and maybe a little more insecurity and a heightened sense of curiosity. So I guess, with that said, I still am curious about things that are happening within the brackets of Los Angeles and with video art. And there's so many amazing artists here that are doing awesome things. I think there's this thing that happens with this. It's almost like a paralysis when you're exposed to it for a good amount of time. You almost want to take it in tidbits, or maybe pull back and focus on other art forms, right, more or less.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think sometimes a big part of what makes young art or music movements, what makes them really vital and exciting and kind of electric for everyone involved, is the fact that it's new and it's constant exploration and people screwing stuff up but getting back up to try again. And once things have been kind of codified and, well understood, and now they're kind of as a guidebook for how you do this thing, it kind of takes a lot of that edge away. And if the edge is part of what really drove you to love it, it may no longer suffice to keep you jazzed into it,
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. However, I think, a lot of it, and maybe I hadn't realized this previously, but I was saying earlier that of the two projects that I mentioned earlier, the La Linea de la Concepcion, which is the double accordion project, and the rotary ECT one, it's they're both challenging in very separate ways. One of the challenges for me right now is sound and video integration, and making sure that those are really tightly wound in terms of audio visual experience. So that for me is the challenge right now. The other challenge is, being able to not drown things out and over process things and enjoy an instrument as I'm playing it in an environment like the double accordion is also a huge challenge for me, because of where I had come from originally. What didn't come from an acoustic instrument. It came from doing unconventional things. So now having a conventional approach to something is challenging. And I guess maybe it's the anticipating that there's going to be something that's going to, totally blow my socks off or something like that within art. I still am totally surprised, by a lot of art that I am currently seeing at Coaxial visual and auditory and whatnot. And at the same token, I'm also very admirable of young people that come into Coaxial and seeing the kind of the curiosity that they come in with, and just I could see this light of curiosity that's just really refreshing with young people, and people who just show up to these shows by themselves and are asking questions. It's that's one of the things that kind of, I would say, probably keeps me motivated, is answering questions and providing that feedback and having that conversation with people that are interested in whatever's happening. A lot of the times I'll curate something and I'll have not a limited understanding of it, but the person who I trust is going to, come in here and do this and help out with this event or whatnot is going to have more to say about it. A lot of the times the people that come in who are like so curious and so drawn to know about this thing that's happening, that like maybe limited knowledge of that thing like actually kind of bumps up my curiosity about what's going to happen in a very interesting way. So from Orange County to Los Angeles, I never thought that I would appreciate a community aspect to the degree that I do. And that comes from hunkering behind a computer and having my middle finger out to everybody in Orange County that was doing whatever bullshit they were doing. But at the same time, I've learned that I just came from something different. If it had been a different place or time or whatnot, like I probably could have appreciated that given the trajectory of my growth, you know, and my interests at that time. I used to be a little more of a punk about it, but I think I've kind of like, since being out here, being part of LA and seeing people's like kind of artistic struggles, you know, for a lot of there's no money in this stuff, and seeing a lot of these struggles in this community so like tightly knit, it's really refreshing. And for me, that's part of the, like, by principle, I'd want to facilitate that as much as I can and help others.
LA is enormous, and it probably, you know, it's the only real potential opportunity probably for a U.S. rival of New York and kind of the New York, what used to be the New York downtown scene, which I guess now is somewhere else. The LA downtown scene just seems to be kind of catching some legs right now. But what's also interesting to me is that unlike my experience with the New York experimental art scene was that it was very much people who solely consider themselves artists and were really outsiders to the rest of society. They kind of like built their own society within that world. In LA, what it seems to be is instead there's a different play in that there's so much creative work that happens in LA that people who are artistic will find a way to have a, quote, normal life, but still have the opportunity through things like Coaxial to be able to really push the envelope with the experimental side of their brain as well. And it seems like it's going to produce a very different and kind of interesting mashup of what is sort of like commercial artwork in combination with this experimental and bizarre and kind of almost punk-driven art expression as well.
There's definitely a lot of interesting ideas being explored at Coaxial from so many different aspects. You know, within Los Angeles, you brought up a good point, which was there's so many amazing artists. There's so many artists that these kind of enclaves start to form. When you have so many people in one area, this thing happens where you need to find your people, right?
Right.
So like in Orange County, there weren't a lot of people doing interesting things. At least I didn't think so. And so when I found the people that were doing interesting things and kind of formed those bonds and friendships, that to me was like a good enough reason to continue doing what you're doing. A lot of complaints, I think, that come from within the experimental music community, not so much the video art community, but the experimental music community, is that it all feels very separated. Like all these little enclaves that happen. But this is a natural repercussion, you know, when you have a lot of people here. And I think that in a lot of cases, it comes down to the venue to really like adamantly reach out to other art forms and music forms and to be open to that. You know, it seems like it's something that is a difficult thing for artists here in general, is that there may be like kind of slow movement from, you know, your artistic expression. You may like actually feel low mobility amongst other feelings of low mobility, like driving from downtown to Echo Park at, 4 p.m. or something like that, which also may indirectly facilitate feelings of low mobility. I think that in general, there's the beauty for me per se, and for other artists who maybe are having difficulty, It's that like these people are out there, you know, it's just a matter of finding them. And then also don't have inhibitions about learning about something that maybe you don't like or you don't feel like it's totally your cup of tea or whatnot.
Right.
I think with video art and things like that, it's like for me it was inviting, but it's different watching a show than sitting through like a screening more or less. Yeah. Some people, it's a different kind of patience that you experience from watching these, and for most people that are even enjoying experimental music, and it's still an unknown territory for them from an experiential point of view. Sure, and that takes like little doses of exposure. I'm sure there's areas of art that I can totally brush up on when it comes to amazing things happen here, and that's one thing that maybe I'm not so self-disciplined in that given my disposition, but like it's something that I do value and care about.
So I want to talk a little bit about your performance and recording things. So I had a chance to listen through not only the current release that you've done with Shelter Death, but also going back to some stuff that you have on SoundCloud, some of which has been around for a long time. And you talk about Shelter Death as being a solo project, but man, it sounds to me like there's an awful lot going on some of the stuff. The older stuff sounds like you've got drum kits wailing in the background and stuff like that. There's a lot of vocals, some of which I would swear aren't your vocals. Was it always a solo project, or do you just like work with people, or did you have was it a band at one point? Tell me a little bit more about the genesis of that.
It's funny you were saying that are there a lot of people on it? And actually for the like kind of next release, I've been actually planning to get other people involved because for a really long period of time, I was kind of just doing this stuff and not really asking too many other people to join in.
I see.
So the project kind of started without any, you know, I didn't really have any inhibitions about it. And, you know, I didn't have any social pressure or anything like that to follow up on a record ever or a tape or anything like that. And so I think, you know, there's this thing that happens when expectations are low that you feel a little more free to do what you want.
Oh, sure, right.
So I would say 95 to 98% of the stuff that's on my SoundCloud is me. There's one project called Bailouts with my good friend who passed away that is me and drummer. Other than that, everything that is on the SoundCloud is me 100%. And my recording setup right now is, I mean, I'm just looking at the stuff that I have. Currently, I have a Fender Strat, I got an amp, I got some little semi-modulars here. I use this Prophet 08 quite a bit. For rotary ECT, I've been doing a lot of Macs. And then one thing that I use that's kind of been a habitual thing for me is a Yamaha AW16 like mixer.
Yeah.
So when I first bought this thing, it was like $800.
Right.
And now you can get them for like $200.
Yeah.
So a lot of the onboard effects on it, like the double pitching and things like that, like I haven't been able to find a real replacement. Some of the onboard like built-in effects for me, or that's the crossover that you'll hear amongst all of these different projects.
Sure. Okay. That's the thread.
That's the hub, you know.
Interesting. Now, one of the things that you mentioned just a minute ago is how you don't really have inhibitions, and I got to tell you, when I hear about this variety of your projects and like the instrumentation that you're working with, or in some cases you talk about it being very, super performative or almost classic performance art, right? It seems like this lack of inhibition is actually kind of the core tool almost more than anything else. You feel completely at home doing a thing and doing it in front of people and as your expression, just throwing it out there. I think there's a lot of people that are going to be listening to this that are like, how can you possibly do that? That seems so intimidating. That seems almost impossible to fathom. How do you think that you got to the point where you don't give a damn? Where you just feel like, I have art and I'm doing it, God damn it. How do you get there?
I don't know. I think to a certain degree, I think I've always given a shit about my own thing, per
Uh-huh.
se. I have a very obsessive nature to things. It took 10 years for me to perform live. It took 10 years of like just recording to even be comfortable with the idea of performing live. And
Hmm.
when I started doing it on a more regular basis, I actually had a lot of difficulty even with the sole like kind of idea of doing it. And I think
Interesting.
I still have difficulty with it. But you know what? It's allowed this different kind of self-discipline, which is this almost like partitioning of so many different things.
Ah,
So I think what you hear when you listen to old material is you kind of hear this amalgamation of so many different things happening. For me, I've always been eclectic nature to me.
okay.
However, I think that that eclectic nature ends up being a lot more pronounced when you have an entire thing that has a character to it,
Right.
in terms of a live performance. So this is where I've developed, when I make anything, I don't know where it's going. It's not until I have everything in front of me that I can learn to partition things in different areas that make
Sure.
sense.
Right.
So that's kind of where I am right now in terms of live performances. However, with Shelter Death per se, the most recent one was put on one of my collaborators' label, Gabby Strong, on Crystalline Morphologies.
Hmm.
Even though none of the instrumentation or artifacts or things are necessarily uniform by any means, I would argue, and maybe somebody else can contest this, is that there's an emotional continuity for the listener that I was striving for with that.
Right. Sure.
So with the future of that album, it's actually to pull back a little bit, and with a lot of people that I admire and want to play with, and to just like have them either submit material or we play live in some scenario or trade tracks or whatnot. But I focus on making it more of a collaborative thing and eventually just taking myself a little bit out of the equation,
Interesting.
for that as
Right.
a recording project. So
Right. Well, unfortunately, our time is gone, and I actually have scribbled down a whole bunch of things. I wanted to talk to you more about songwriting as this like intensely personal thing. I wanted to talk about this idea of CDRs at one point being sort of like the trading mechanism, but we just don't have time to finish. But there is one thing I want to ask of you.
yeah,
A lot of the people that are going to be listening to this are not going to have the breadth of experiencing bleeding edge new multimedia art that you have got. You're in a cat's bird position where you get to see amazing new things kind of in a constant flow. What would you suggest for people that want to have a taste? I mean, this is one of the real values of the internet is that for people who are looking for something different, looking for maybe their artistic people and haven't found them yet, what are some things that you would suggest for people to kind of be able to immerse themselves in something that would give them a taste of what you experience all the time?
that's a really great question. More or less because I think there's so many different routes that I have taken. I would say in terms of art, there's like and finding your grasp with different integrated audiovisual stuff. My kind of skin that I have in the game is very much in coaxial.
Mm-hmm.
So I would even locate that as a start. And although the site is pretty good, I would actually, if you are social media inclined or have Facebook, subscribe to that page.
The coaxial page.
Yeah, the Coaxial page on Facebook, and it's hard to establish where people are coming from. However, there's so many different things happening there, that you can go through our list of events that are coming up,
Mm-hmm.
and you can read up on these and
these people,
see,
right? Sure.
See the different angle that would cater to you. So from the aspect of coaxial, that's a good way to explore that.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah. Again, you guys actually turned so much through that the flow of people would give a lot of touch points for people to start exploring.
Right. Yeah. In terms of a direct reference for this stuff, it's I feel like it's all right there. And when I go and I look at our events that I have, like, I become gently surprised on what's coming up and get excited myself and use it as a reference myself. There's a lot of different areas that I kind of have my eye tuned towards, but nothing of a real staple nature. Usually, like, if it's the weekend, it's like I'll look at like Curate LA or 5 Every Day or something like that. And in terms of just like maybe, I think maybe even your question just pros like a more general like maybe attitude towards how to approach this stuff. Mm-hmm. Maybe I would say from an attitude perspective, for me it was about doing the research, I guess, right. And doing that research like entailed that sometimes, even if I was really skeptical of something or on the surface for whatever reason, if there was like an inch of something that seemed peculiar or odd or sparked a little bit of curiosity, you might end up changing your like view just from like delving deep into this. For most experimental music, I think we both have experienced like that initial feeling of, what the hell is this? And then years later, you're like, this is the most important thing that happened to me. So that's, I would say never sell those feelings short ever, and always kind of pursue them from whatever angle that you can.
Right on. Well, Christopher, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat. It was really great to get to know more about you, to hear about the not only where you're coming from, but also where Coaxial's come from and how you are working with that crew to make that such a vital spot of the LA scene. Thank you so much for your time, man.
I greatly appreciate you giving me the time. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, we will talk again soon.
All right. Thanks.
All right, bye. Many thanks to Christopher Reid Martin for having the great chat. It was cool to hear about what he's doing at Coaxial, what's going on in LA, and kind of how he approaches his music. If you get a chance, check out his work at Sheltered Death. You can find it on Spotify as well as kind of all over the internet. His SoundCloud has got some great stuff on it. You can also check out the Coaxial website for more information about what's going on there. Or as Chris discussed, you can also check out their Facebook page to kind of get an ongoing stream of what's happening in that part of the world. I want to take the opportunity to thank another set of friends that have been very helpful in keeping me going with this podcast. Brian Crabtree and Kelly Kane over at Mono. They've been so instrumental in my own personal exploits with music and media technology, but also they've always been so sweet about being supportive and helpful and keeping me engaged with the world that I love so much. So I want to reach out and thank them very much. I want to, as always, thank the people that are helping spread the word, folks like Synthtopia, my friends at Cycling 74, and the people over at Create Digital Music. I want to thank everybody that is telling their friends, family, frenemies, whatever. Thank you so much for spreading the word. And with that, I'm going to bug out for the day. We will catch you next week. Bye.